This is my third attempt in this video. They keep getting erased for some reason. All right, Kevin. I'm gonna make a video about mastering and the plugins that I use and the effects that I try to achieve. Oh my god, I'm so frustrated. Okay. So whenever I have a track and I think the recording's good and I think the mixing's good, and I'm down to the last steps of getting it presentable to a listener, or I want to export it, I have a few steps that I follow if I'm going super try hard. And then obviously you can ignore the parts that are especially try hard. Just before I start, it's nice to have some wave candies up that show you different things that you care about, like the frequency spectrum, maybe the balance. It's super, super nice to have the Julian loudness meter, which is free. It's nice to have span is okay, but it's not necessary. TDR Nova, I'll talk about that later. Just before I get started, it's another free plugin that's like not super necessary, but pretty and free. So my workflow generally goes like this. I take my song, I put it into the playlist. If I'm doing my try-hard like template mastering setup, I have it play through mixer track number 1, where I have a bunch of effects on it. The effects include things like stereo enhancer, which will change. At this stage, the only thing that really makes sense to do is how far I want the stereo channels separated. So however far they are already separated, this will make them separated more. This will make them separated less. Less is obviously, if it's all the way, it just like doesn't change off of straight down the middle. If it's separated more, it's like a ludicrous amount of stereo separation where like anything that's even a little bit separated is just like entirely left or entirely right. And you just got to play around with what you like the most. I use 2 different parametric EQs, one that's at the preset for 20 hertz and 18 kilohertz. Which one of these presets that cuts off is up to you, depending on your song, but it's definitely good to have some kind of cutoff. EQ2, this one I just like play around with, and it's advisable to do like really gentle rolls, especially if you're doing gain. If you do like a really sharp peak, I'm scrolling up and down. If you do like a really sharp peak, chances are it's going to make some kind of like weird resonance in your song that was already like just barely not too loud. So try to be gentle if you're in the mastering stage at this point. Like if you want, like if you're just like kicks are just like in general, or like the bass side of the spectrum is just like in general too quiet, which you see through like your colors over here not being saturated enough, whatever. Shelves are good. Gentle roll-offs in parts that you think are like too weird sounding are good. This plugin after the EQ is a multi-band compressor, which is something that Maximus already does. So you could either learn Maximus or look at this. The idea behind a multi-band compressor is like halfway in between an EQ and the compressors, where it discriminates based on frequency and punishes signals that are too loud at that frequency. So at the thresholds that I've set, they're exceeded in the high band as I start this song, and it lowers it down respective to how high above the threshold it goes. These two are both fruity limiter. This one I have set to, I'm using the limiter function within it. This one I'm using the compressor function, which are very similar. Limiters are like, they set a ceiling for things where you just can't go above that ceiling. It's a concrete ceiling that you just don't go past. So if you have sound that you try to go past the ceiling, it just gets chopped off. And this is actually like, I could make a 10-second video that just like, this is what you need. Because if SoundCloud punishes you, it's going to be almost certainly because your true peak value, as seen by your Julian loudness meter, and you should basically only trust the values in your Julian loudness meter, your true peak value goes above -1. Ultimately, like 0 is like the point where what it means to be 0 decibels in the case of, you know, uploading a song to SoundCloud is that's the highest volume it can take. But in the process of transcoding it from whatever you give them to whatever they put out, it might get a little bit higher. So it's super highly recommended to export something that does not exceed, does not go above, or, you know, more positive than -1 decibels as your true peak maximum, which means that you're going to have a limiter near the end of your signal chain that does not let anything higher than that amount through. So your ceiling will be, you know, maybe -1 itself. maybe even a little bit lower if you want it to be really safe so that weird artifacts don't get through and accidentally make it a little bit louder. That is the quintessential thing you want to have different about your song if SoundCloud is messing up your sounds. The other half of limiters is compressors, which is basically just like a limiter that you have the option of making it gentle. So the limiter will like chop it off if it's higher than that. The compressor, actually I should rearrange these. So compressors first. Limiter should be like the final thing where it's like nothing that's higher than this volume will get through, or else SoundCloud will mess with it. So I will like, that's the last soldier at the gate. Compressors do that more gently. So the compressor tab in the same plugin, I set a ceiling, but instead of being the ceiling where like nothing gets through, it's the ceiling where it like pushes things back based on how high I have my ratio set, where the extreme case is like basically the same thing as a limiter, where it's like if it's above this, it's just gonna get chopped out. But if it's more gentle, it'll just like push it back down. So really, really loud things will get punished more, and things that just barely exceed the threshold will get punished a little bit, and things that don't exceed the threshold won't be changed at all. The other half of compressors that are useful is the gain. The reason why it's called a compressor is because it takes the dynamic range, it takes the how loud the song is, and it raises everything up so that the quietest parts are louder, and then it takes the loudest parts down so the loudest parts are quieter. So the dynamic range, how the volume, how loud the louds and quiet the quiets are in a song becomes a narrower window, which is sometimes a good thing, sometimes a bad thing. Beyond that, more things you might notice are the fact that I have a reference track here. So it's nice if you have a sound that you're going for, if you have an effect that you're going for, if you have like a range that you're going for in weirdness and panning in volume, it's nice to have something that sounds like the thing that you want to sound like right there on hand, so you can just listen to it and compare on the fly, on the go, on the fleek. Great. I wanna raise it. They don't sound anything like each other at all. It's nice to be able to automate the volume. So I have this track on mixer track 1. I automate the volume of the mixer fader to that mixer track. And you probably noticed that on SoundCloud, it's oftentimes starts a little bit after the song is supposed to actually start. So I'll sometimes intentionally make it start later so that SoundCloud doesn't mess with it. I will go ahead and left click shift on this little button so I can have it gently fade the sound in, fade the volume in, so that there's no like click associated with the instantaneous 0 volume to maximum volume. Yeah. Doesn't have to be super gentle, just has to go somewhat continuously from 0 to max. Yeah, there we go. And same thing with the other side. Click shift, drag. Great. And so once I have that, it's good to master checking the whole song at low and at high volumes. Again, the idea is that at high volumes, everything's going to sound better, like always, almost always. All those nice little like pin drop subtleties that you add to make it sound better are going to be super obvious when the volume's high, but that's not always how people listen to it. So it's good to check to make sure that the parts that matter to you are still evident at lower volumes. So I'll oftentimes go back and forth between like 12 o'clock and 3 o'clock on the master volume track, the master volume dial. I will export as a WAV file, which is basically always a good idea at 24 bit depth. And if I'm being super tryhard, I will listen to it afterwards on my speakers, on my studio monitors. If you're incredibly tryhard, you would listen in like your car stereo or like on your phone in different rooms. But who cares about that? And then you're good to go. So I will put some sources in the description to the Julian loudness meter, to TDR Nova, to the sources that I stole this information from that are better than me, that you should listen to instead of me. And that'll be that. Now it's time to see if this motherfucking video exported or recorded or whatever.